everybody. I'm Mike DeLisio.
I'm Z Garcia.
And I'm Camilla.
And today we're going to be taking a look at Kinfire Council, the newest game in a line of games in the same kind of world, coming from Incredible Dream Publishing. And this is a worker placement game. It has some things that are going to be familiar, but some also kind of tweaks to what you may be used to seeing in a worker placement game. So I'm just going to give you a high-level overview on how the game is played, and then we'll come back here and we'll give you our thoughts. Kinfire Council is a worker placement game that plays out over 5 rounds. Players are playing as city council members who are sending out their workers, including their special worker, the Seeker, that has a hexagonal base as opposed to the round bases for the workers, out into the city and sometimes outside of the city to gain resources, take actions that are going to allow them to gain points throughout the game. Also, there is a cult group that is going to be taking actions throughout the game, and they're gaining their own points. So at some point in the game, if a player decides that they think the cult members are going to actually have the highest score, they might throw in with the cult and get cult influence and maybe become the cult conspirator. And in that case, if the cult were to win, the cult conspirator would win with them. Otherwise, you're playing to have the most points. You're playing this game over those 5 rounds, with each round having a 3-part, 3-phase structure to it. Sun's rise, day's light, night's fall. Most of the action happens here where you place out your workers. But let's just talk briefly about the 3 phases. In Sun's rise, you're going to prep the docket, which means you take the top 2 decree cards from the deck. These are going to be items that players can vote on throughout the round. They're going to tell you what these cards will do if they're passed, and you will be able to vote for one of these cards throughout the round. Whichever card has the most votes is actually going to be the one that passes and do what it says. The next thing we do is unleash the cult, which is where we're going to reach into this cultist bag here. We're going to draw out 3 tokens and put them in the hideout. So this happens at the beginning of every round. So we have our 3 cult tokens here. What you do is you look at the numbers on them, and then you place them on those numbers out in the city. That blocks that spot for the current round. So that goes into 1, this goes into 10, this goes into 15. All right, so there are 3 tiers to the city: tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. I can scroll up just a little bit so you can see all of tier 3 up there, but you're getting most of it right now. For each of these, you're going to draw a card. Well, potentially, looking at the number. So this is number 1. We draw this top card, and this is going to tell us a couple things. This is from the threat deck. It's going to tell us the number of threat tokens that have to be on the card for it to trigger. When it triggers, it tells you what happens. This is what you'd have to pay to clear the threat and the points you'd get for doing so. So there are 3 different areas here: 1 to 6, 7 to 12, 13 to 18. This is a 1. It goes right there. Nothing further would happen. Then we go to 10. That's the next card. We look at it, and it also has the same type of information. We place it in the 7 to 12 area. This one is 15, so we would take it and we would place it in the 13 to 18. Now, if instead this third token had been an 11, instead of drawing a card, since there's one already there, we would put a threat token on it. Whenever the number is met or exceeded on that card, then the card will trigger and do its stuff, which is generally not good. All right. Then comes the meat of the game, where you're going to be dispatching your workers out in turn order. And when you place a worker, you're taking them from your player mat. The city has these circular spots that you can place a worker to and take the associated action. If you go to the 2nd or 3rd tier, you may have to pay taxes. So if you wanted to go to the market gate, for example, that's in tier 2, you'd have to pay 1 of your gold into the city's coffers to go there. Tier 3 requires 2 taxes. So you're placing out your workers and you're taking the different actions. A lot of them involve gaining resources, converting resources into other things that you're going to then need to do to gain your actual points. The Seekers, as I mentioned, have a hexagonal base, and that means that not only can they go to any of the city spots, still paying any associated taxes if that's required, or they can also go to these areas here because they show a hex spot to kind of clear that threat. In this case, if I sent my Seeker here, I'd need to spend 2 of these gems to be able to clear the card. If I did, I'd take it, I'd get those 8 points immediately, and then I could keep this card because it becomes a resource that you can pay to do other things. And some of these things, like here, you can spend a threat card that you've cleared to gain those particular items there. The the regular workers will sometimes be able to get an ability to go into those outside the city spots, but generally they cannot. Everyone also has access to this location guide, which tells you what all of the different locations in the game does, and it also tells you what the backside of those location spots are when they get upgraded, because for city planning, you can go here to upgrade any of these spots. You would just flip it over to the other side, and someone could actually kind of take control of that area, which means that if I was the one that had upgraded this, I could choose to put one of my influence markers there, and then if anybody else went to this spot, I would get that little bonus right there of a coin. All right, so you're going to be continuing to do that. You're going to place all your workers out, take the associated actions. After you place a worker, any one of your workers, you have the opportunity to perform an errand. There are two things generally that you can do as an errand. Number one is you can meet one of the city needs. The game starts where there are 3 food that are there at the beginning of the round, and city needs can be added to. But if you were to take an errand to fulfill a city need, if I had a food, I could spend that food, place one of my influence tokens here. At the end of the round, you get 2 points for each met need. And so I would get 2 points for that. If I were to do another couple, I would clear the city need. I would make sure the city needs had been met, and I would get all 6 points. That would be assuming no one else went there. The other thing you can do is you can build floors of the lighthouse. And so there are 5 of these locations that you can build lighthouses at. And what they do is they tell you what the costs are to build 1, 2, or 3 floors. You would, if you wanted to, as an errand, you can spend the required resources, and then you would move the lighthouse tracker up 1, 2, or 3 floors, depending upon which of those you took. You would place an influence marker next to it because this is going to give you points. The more floors you build, the more points you get per kind of dot there. Like if I had an influence marker on the 3 dot one, it would be 3 times 2 is 6. It also tells you how many points that the cult are going to get at the end of the round too. So in this case, if it ended there, the cult would only get 2 points, whereas if you didn't build any levels of the lighthouse, the cult would have gotten 9 points. All right. And so you're going to kind of play throughout that way. You're going to send out your workers. At the end of the round, you're going to resolve the city needs. If these have all been resolved, you get points. If they have not been resolved, you're going to bring out another cultist. So that's potentially bad. You find out which of the decree cards got the most votes, and you would do what that says. If there were any remaining cultists on the board, you would have to take an action. And that's something I should mention. When you place a worker, you can either take one of the associate actions. They have 2 different things that you can do. Or if you are adjacent to a cultist orthogonally, you can arrest that cultist. And so if I went here, instead of taking this market gate action, I could arrest this cultist. And taking them off the board obviously means that when you resolve the cult at the end of the round, you don't have those bad things occur. These also can be used as resources to pay for other things. For example, right here, you can spend a cult token that you've arrested to gain some associated boon. All right. So that's another thing that you can do. Sometimes, you could even train your workers this guard ability. And it says that when a worker arrests a cult leader or cult member, they can still use that location's ability. So let's say that this worker just came off my board. He had been trained as a guard. Let me just do this. I actually took one that wasn't on my board. Let's do this. I trained him as a guard, and now he's got that ability. Anyway, you get the idea. There are things you can do to kind of do those things. You build the lighthouse, you pass the first player marker to the next player, and then any money that was in the coffers goes back into the supply. You do that over 5 rounds. Whoever has the most points at the end of the round is going to win, and that could even be the cult. At the beginning of the game, you randomly take 3 cards off of the threat deck and you place them under that hidden threat marker there. More cards can be added to this stack throughout the game, and you're going to add up the points at the bottom and give the cult that many points at the end of the game. These go from anywhere from 3 on the low end to 20 on the high end. And as I said, more cards can be added to this, especially if someone is deciding they want to throw in with the cult. They can find ways to do that. All right, that gives you a general high-level overview of the game. Let's head back and let you know what we think. Okay, so there you have it. And like I said, it was a relatively high level overview, although there's still a lot that I tried to cover because it's a game that I think, especially when you first see it set up on the table, can look a bit intimidating and maybe just a lot of stuff going on. And there is, but I also feel like it's not quite as complex as it looks on the table. Would you say that that's been your experience as well? That it's certainly not an entry-level game by any means. I would consider a medium-weight game, but it's not quite as overwhelming and complex as it might appear when you first see it.
I think structurally, the game does a good job of breaking down phases to take away that complexity, which, to be fair, I think is a double-edged sword. It does lead the game to feeling a little bit procedural. But I do think the game is as complex as it seems once you realize a lot of that complexity comes down to so many intertwining things. There's not that complexity the players build. That complexity isn't necessarily on the table when you start, but it is realizing that I go there and get this, and then I cash that in over here, and then when I capture a cultist, he then can cash in for this thing. So I agree it looks more complex than it is. I also think by the third round, you're at that complexity that you imagined.
I think so. I think that's the difference is the first round is much simpler than it looks. And honestly, not just the way it looks on the table, but the way it feels when you're setting up. I feel like even through setup, it's just like, oh my gosh. And one more thing. Oh, which deck is that? Who gets what? And so you feel a little, I guess, overwhelmed your first couple times setting this up. But the first round is pretty straightforward.
Sure.
I don't necessarily feel like it's procedural, but I do feel like the complexity does come as you start to get that asymmetry, as you have different skills assigned to your different workers, and you have to make sure you use the right one at the right spot to get the max benefit there, to combo up. This is one that at the beginning of the round, you probably have at least your next 3 turns planned. You have I need to do this first, this second, this third. Boom, boom, boom. That's the so it's more about sequencing your turns and making sure you nail that, and that's where the complexity comes in.
Sure.
But as far as the actual gameplay, it feels pretty streamlined. I mean, there's one of 3 things you do on your turn. And it really is about doing the right one at the right time in the right sequence to maximize it.
Yeah, and it's interesting you brought up kind of this idea of the setup, that there's, a fair number of things to kind of put in its place. And, in thinking about this review and when I've been playing the game kind of in a critical light, thinking about, okay, how am I going to approach this when I'm reviewing it? Some of the issues that I've had with the game are ones that I think could potentially be alleviated a bit if you had seeded decks and maybe a seeding on the cultists as they come out. And what I'm getting at is this. A couple of the issues that I have with the game are that the decree cards, which are the cards that you can vote on, are going to be situationally more or less important depending upon which round of the game you're in. And so as you get later in the game especially, and there's decree cards that really are not terribly impactful one way or the other, that could be a little bit of a kind of a feeling of dissatisfaction of oh, okay, well, neither of these are really that exciting. I don't really care which card gets voted on, and maybe that could have been alleviated with seeding the cards in such a way that they are more situationally appropriate. Also, you can have a situation where you are at the very beginning of the game, you're kind of putting out those cultists and you just get hammered in the very first setup of the game where just cards are triggering, things are coming out on the board, and maybe that could have been alleviated. But then the other side of that is okay, is that worth the trade-off of the extra time and effort it would take to set up and tear down the game every time? And I think I've landed on no. I'd rather have those, what I see to be somewhat weaknesses of the game, and save that on the setup and the teardown.
Yeah, for sure. And I definitely think I would agree that those can be weaknesses and feel not great when they come out, to put it very non-eloquently. It just doesn't feel good. It's like, oh, those decrees aren't great late game. Oh, I have a sunrise ability. I don't need a sunrise ability. Oh, and my character goes into the decrees. Those moments don't feel great, right? But I don't think it's worth the trade-off of extra setup and having to seed a deck or something like that, because there are other things you can do. You're like, okay, fine, then that turn I'll really go into the lighthouse for those errands. I won't go and try to maximize the city needs, or the city needs aren't really working with the resources I have. I'll switch focus and do this instead. So I think that while there are still very few things you can do on your turn, I mean, there really is just a couple actions, there's a lot of different pivot points built into the game. And that, to me, alleviates those areas of potential frustration, where just the randomness of the game, the decrees that are coming out, the city needs that are coming out, the cultists are hammering you, that kind of melts away with the flexibility that's built in.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. And the extra steps in setup, I think personally wouldn't be worth it to me. But Mike, you're right also that it does have that slight frailty that anything with this many moving parts is bound to have sometimes, where it is not a great game. This game has that potential for, wow, what an amazing session we had, versus, that the third round was kind of wonky, wasn't it? Because something or other happened that didn't really fit.
Yeah, I agree. But that being said, there are a lot of things I really, really like about this game. This is not a great comparison, but for some reason, the game gives me slight Lords of Waterdeep vibes on a couple of steps beyond that, of course. But I really think that there are certain decisions that were made design-wise that are so clever. Just the idea of, every time you place a worker, you're going to be taking some type of action. Or maybe arresting a cultist, or if you train that worker, doing both, which I think is really cool to be able to train any of your workers to do different things. I like that a lot. And then you've got the errand, which is a very simple thing. I think a lot of times in games where you've got this kind of a free secondary action, free, so to speak, you're paying resources to do them, but I think you get what I mean. That it gives you a list of too many things you can do. It's like, okay, well, as a free action, you can do one of these 7 things. Come on already. Here, it's like you're really doing essentially 2 things. You might have a character power that lets you do something different as an errand. But essentially, you're going to be fulfilling a city need, or you're going to be building a step of the lighthouses. Both of those things are point-generating actions that you're doing. And I really like that structure. Place a worker, do a thing, meet a city need, or build a lighthouse, and then it's the next player's turn. And the fact that there are so many locations, I think, is what is a little bit of a hard sell at the beginning of your first game. It's just like, where do I even go? Well, you can kind of go anywhere. You're going to get something good anywhere you go. So just pick a thing and get some resources, then use those resources to do a thing.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think my favorite part of this game, and you're alluding to this, is a worker placement that has quite a bit going on and can be overwhelming at first. My favorite thing about this game is the amazing amount of world building that they do for a worker placement game, which are, I would say, not generally known, for the amazing amount of sort of immersion they're going to give you. Do world building really feel like, you go there and get stone. You go there and you draw a couple cards. What do they represent? Cards, they're cards. They give you abilities. No, in this game, those decks mean things. The locations feel like real places in a real town where we are really dealing with crises, and there are so many personalities. I mean, just even assigning your workers a face and a name and a little blurb does serious heavy lifting in putting you in a real imagined place that is very well put together, and the world building is just fantastic. It really transports you, this game, especially for a worker placement game.
And I think that's especially impressive because it is coming on the heels of two other games, both of which were cooperative,
Yeah.
and both of which we've spoken about how they have such great world building and such great, personality in the characters and things like that. So we see that in this same game without it feeling repetitive. If you've played those other ones, it feels more like a wink and like it just more lore and more building in this world that they've created. But you also don't feel left behind if you haven't played those two games. It's not, what are these characters? So it's such a great balance of introducing you to this world and really building it up and immersing you in it, not making you feel left behind if you haven't played, but if you have played, it's more of what you want. It's not repetitive. It's not like, oh, these characters again. Because you also have the new counselors that are coming in, which have their own personality, which are building into the asymmetry. And then outside of that, you have your others, depending on the player count, however many workers you have, and you're building their personality, giving them, training them into being artisans or scholars to give you extra powers. So it's just such a great balance of world building without the mechanisms kind of melt away, but are still so relevant.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I can back up what you're saying, Camilla, because I still haven't played Kinfire Chronicles. I never played the first game in this series, the cooperative dungeon crawl game. I haven't played that, but I still feel like I have ownership in this world. And the other thing, one of my weaknesses as a game teacher is that when I am teaching a game that is not terribly thematic, I tend to get frustrated with that, and I teach the game as mechanisms. And it's something I need to work on still after all these years of teaching games. In this game, it's such an easy thematic kind of push, right? You're city councilors. You are trying to kind of gain the best influence. You're going to these different regions in the city and you're building lighthouses. But there's this shadowy cult group that's around there as well. And, they've got their own kind of agenda that they're trying to push. You even have the opportunity, if you think that that's your best interest, to throw in with them. So all of those things are such an easy integration thematically while you're teaching, and I think it does help teach the game. It explains why you might have some different abilities to somebody else, why you might have some different agendas that you're literally voting for at times, and other times doing through the actions that you take. And so, I think that's really good. And I was a little worried when I first heard how the game worked, that the cult aspect would be a step too far, but honestly, I really don't think so. I love that it's in this game, even though I don't think that people are going to feel comfortable going at that their first couple of games, because it's more obtuse.
Yeah, that was one of my biggest worries with this game is it going to feel too semi-co-op? Where we all have to do this to make sure the cult doesn't take over. Is it viable to win by partnering with them? And what I've come to with multiple plays is I really am glad it's there, because I think having that cult that is going up in the points as well does build a sense of tension and puts pressure on you to not just bank on those end game points, not just bank on the end game, but you can really kind of gauge where you should be based on where they are. If you're really falling far behind them, you're probably, not doing well in the game, and so
Sure.
It's almost a built-in gauge of how you are doing with all the different things going on. So, and I do think it is viable to partner with them as well. So it's definitely, I'm with you, Mike. It's one that kind of kept me back from this game. Initially getting into it was what they're calling the negotiation or the bidding mechanism, with the decrees. I like that as well, because if you have a counselor that really plays into that, that's a really viable strategy to build up how much you can do. I know I played a game, one of the games I played where I was with that, and I just really went into the decrees, and I think every round I was getting a new decree that did something sunrise, and then near the end I switched to do other powers. And so I really like both of those elements that I was very hesitant on. I think that they bring in their own ways, bring tension to the game, and kind of keep it not on rails, but again, give you that perspective of where you are and what's happening in all the different areas.
I think this is one of the few points in which I'm going to generally disagree with you guys, and that is that I don't love... I like very much the cult aspect of the game from a world building and a setting and a story point of view. I don't love the extra mechanisms that come with it when it comes to players being able to ally with them. I think it is one step too far, in my opinion, which is also why I enjoy the two-player game. The two-player game does away with that. In fact, changes a couple of what the symbols mean, where you are just pulling back the cultists, keeping them at bay. You can capture them and then, use them to do something. I thought it was one step too far to also, on top of everything that's going on in this game, all the moving parts, all the different places you can go, throw in another and you can also ally with the cultists, and you might win with the cultists, and your game plan is going to change. It's this game's merge, in my opinion. It is one thing too far. That's an Ankh reference, by the way, if you don't know what I'm talking about. And I personally would love to see that not be something I have to teach, honestly. And that's why, again, I like it at two players. They're there doing what I want them to do. They're world building. They're shady and in the background and wrecking the town. So I will put them down. I just don't want to have to deal with all the extra rules for more stuff.
That's fair. Obviously, I think that, it's the thing that is most off-grid. That's a terrible term for it, but most out of ordinary from like a traditional Euro-style game, which this is in many ways. So did we want to go to final thoughts? Maybe we can incorporate our thoughts on the components if we want to during that. We didn't really talk about that.
Yeah, you want to go ahead?
Sure. You want me to go? Okay. I really, really like this one. I had a lot of reservations coming into it. And with, like I was saying, with multiple plays, most of them have just melted away. I'm going to come in at an 8.5 on this. I love the worker placement action. I love building your own asymmetry. I love the world. I love a different view on this world that I am familiar with. In a way, I've really enjoyed this Kinfire series, if you will, that incredible dream and this world that they've created. I feel like this is the game that kind of made me a fangirl. I was extremely hesitant of it because I don't really like negotiation. I don't really like bidding. I don't really like semi-co-op. I don't really like, all these things that I'm like, ugh. So I was really like, okay, I think this is going to be the one that takes it too far. And I was very, very surprised how simple the gameplay ended up feeling, once you got past that initial learn and setup. I was really pleased with the turn sequence and how broken you feel on your turn in a positive way, how you're like, I'm more powerful than everyone here. You guys have no chance. And then you look at the scoreboard and you're like, oh, wow, we all have equal chances because we're all so broken. I really, really love that feel. That you just feel good and you feel like you're contributing to this world and this council that's going on and really just vying for your own interest. I don't like political games. I feel like this is the absolute exception to that. You did say about the components. I enjoy the components. I think Incredible Dream kind of consistently nails components.
Yeah.
I'm really glad for the three-tiered. I think visually that's needed in order to really see the different tiers of the town, and where you're going to go. And anytime you put nice chits in a bag and are pulling them out, I'm pretty on board. So yeah, there are some concerns I have about the deluxe components, but I don't know if we're covering that specifically. The deluxe ones, them not quite matching the base rulebook and stuff like that. So I would probably opt just for the retail version for those. But yeah, for me it's an 8.5. I really enjoy this game.
I'm going to come down at an 8 on this one. I very much enjoy it. It's I think you hit the nail on the head that this is a feel-good game. And I think that's true, 95% of the time. I already talked about a couple of issues I have with the game feeling a little procedural, the cult, and some of those ideas that it introduces. But this is a feel-good game. You're right. It feels good to meet the city's needs. It feels good to rebuild the lighthouse. It feels good to arrest the cultists. to give your people more powers. This is not a game that beats you down. It's a game that builds you up, much like what you're doing with the city you're inhabiting. And hardship can come with that. That's fine. But generally, again, 95% of the time, it's not driven from you. A place falls into ruins because it was, bombed by the cultists. And you rally together and try to come out of that and build it. Again, fantastic world building and writing in this. So I enjoy it. I have my reservations, like I said, but if I'm looking for a thematic worker placement game, this is a very, very good choice. So I'm giving it a strong 8 out of 10.
This is it's been a while since a worker placement game has hit this hard for me, because there's a lot of worker placement games, and every so often, they'll do some kind of an innovation with how the actual mechanism of worker placement happens. That's not the case here. This is a standard worker placement game, but it really is unique to me. And we've mentioned it also. I'm not going to belabor those points. Component-wise, just so you know, I did use the retail edition in the overview. In my opinion, if I had said that was the deluxe edition, I don't think anyone would have batted an eye. I think the retail looks deluxe. Incredible production, I think, in the game. I mentioned my reservations. The two kind of reservations I have with the game were the things I mentioned about how, since the things aren't seeded, you could have some things that come out and be less consequential depending upon where they are in the game. You can just get hammered in a particular round with a bunch of things blowing up with the cult, and that can feel a little overwhelming. It's like, oh my gosh, this hits you, this hits you. But that's not enough for me to feel anything less than enamored with this game. Really, really solid game all the way around. I'm going to be coming in at an 8.5 as well, but I'm really close, really close to going higher. And there's also an expansion that can add new locations, and maybe, when I feel like I want to jump into some of those, that could even make the game go higher. Who knows? But for right now, excellent game at an 8.5. So there you have it. That is Kinfire Council. I'm Mike DeLisio.
I'm Z Garcia.
And I'm Camilla.
And let's build some lighthouses, shall we?
Let's do it.
Why not?
Hey, thanks for watching another video here on the Dice Tower. We really appreciate you stopping by and checking our things out. Thanks so much for joining us today. And hey, if you really like what we're doing here at the Dice Tower, then there are different ways to support the Dice Tower. One of those ways is through Patreon. We have links in the description to this video, and we have links to lots of other things we do down there, so definitely check it out. But either way, we're glad you watched us. Tell your friends about the Dice Tower. Until next time, though, I'm Tom Vassell, and I hope you enjoyed this video.